The girl sat in Bay 14, where the air smelled of oil and metal, where old rifles were stacked in rows, and dust danced in the morning light. She had a small bench near the back wall away from the voices, and boots that came and went. Her name was Lena, and no one ever asked it. Every day was the same. She came early, cleaned rifles, kept her head down, and left when the lights dimmed. Soldiers would walk in loud and tired, their uniforms stained with sweat, or worse, they tossed weapons on the tables, never caring who caught them. Some said, "Thank you," most said nothing. No one noticed Lena, not really. She wore the same thing every day, a gray shirt, rolled sleeves, hair tied back, face calm, hands fast. No one knew where she came from, only that she worked hard, never spoke unless asked, and never made mistakes. The rifles came to her in pieces, and left like new again. Her hands moved like she had done this her whole life. One day a new sound came into the bay, not boots, not laughter. It was quiet, steady, like water dripping in a cave. She looked up. Just for a second a man stood at the entrance, tall, still, face hard, like stone, his uniform black, with no marks, no name. He walked straight to her table, like he already knew her. He did not toss his weapon like the others. He placed it gently in front of her barrel, toward the floor, grip clean, no blood, no dirt, only one word marked into the side, a mark she knew deep in her bones. She looked up, but said nothing. He met her eyes for only a moment, and nodded, just once, as if to say, "Remember this." Then he turned and walked out, leaving the weapon behind and something heavier in the air. Lena stared at the rifle. Her fingers moved without thinking, touched the surface, like it might vanish. If she blinked, it was not just a weapon, it was a part of her memory, a part she had locked away long ago. She glanced around, but no one seemed to notice. No one cared. The man was gone. The weapon was still here. And something inside her chest had started to burn again, something she thought was dead. She picked it up slowly, hand steady, but cold. The weight was familiar, too familiar. Every curve, every scratch told a story not written in any book. This rifle had been with her once, in another life, before the silence, before the shadows. That night she stayed in the bay longer than usual. The lights flickered, but she kept her hands moving, cleaning every inch of that rifle like it was a puzzle only she could solve, like it had something to say if she listened close enough. She did not notice the time until the guards passed by again. Their chatter faded, and the bay grew quiet again, like it always did, but this time it felt different. It felt like something was coming, like the walls were watching. She packed her things slowly, tucked the rifle under a cloth, and turned toward the exit, but her foot caught on something small and sharp. She looked down. A slip of paper had been left near her table. No one else had been here, not since the man in black. She picked it up, unfolded it carefully. The paper was blank at first, then words began to glow across its soft blue, like starlight. "Meet me Bay 17 at 0400, bring the rifle." Lena's heart skipped. She looked around again, but the bay was empty. The smell of oil still hung in the air, but now it mixed with something else, something old, something real. She folded the note and tucked it in her sleeve. Her fingers brushed against the scar above her brow, and for the first time in years, she remembered the sound of her own voice screaming through fire and smoke, calling a name that never answered. She walked out of the bay and into the dark hallway, her steps quiet, her eyes sharp, the weight of the rifle hidden, but present like a shadow pressed against her back. She did not know why the man had come or why he chose her, but she knew the look in his eyes. It was not random, it was not kind, it was something else. It was recognition. As she reached her bunk, she sat down and looked at the rifle. Once more her hands still felt warm from touching it. Her mind raced with pictures she could not stop and names she could not say. The note said 0400, and she would be there, not for him, not for answers, but because deep down she already knew the truth. She was not just a cleaner, not just a girl in a quiet bay. She was someone they had tried to erase, someone they wanted forgotten, but someone had remembered, and now the past was walking back into her life with quiet steps and a loaded weapon. And she would not run this time. You said, "Please write part 2 of the story, make it more unique and engaging. Using simple and basic English, the part should be exactly 800 words and written in third-person style. Do not use any full stops, dots, anywhere in the text. Ensure the story continues smoothly and keeps the audience hooked from the start." The night felt heavy around her, the walls of the barracks, close and silent. The only sound was her breath, slow and shallow. Her fingers gripped the rifle under her blanket like it might disappear. If she let go, her heart beat louder than she wanted, louder than the world outside. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, eyes locked on the small clock glowing in the dark. 03:55 minutes. Left. Her boots were already laced, her jacket already zipped. The note was folded tight in her pocket, like a whisper she was afraid to lose. She stood slowly and moved through the dark hallway, each step quiet, each corner empty, like the whole base was asleep, and she was walking through a dream, a strange one, where memory and truth blurred like smoke on glass. Base 17 was far from where she worked, cold and forgotten near the edge of the compound, the doors old and loud, but when she arrived they slid open, without a sound, as if waiting for her, as if they had known she would come. Inside the bay the lights were low shadows stretched across the walls, and the air smelled of dust. And Silence Ramsey was already there, standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed, rifle on his back, face unreadable as ever. She stepped inside, but said nothing. He looked at her, then down at the rifle in her hands, and nodded once, like he had been waiting, like this was part of a plan she never agreed to. "You remember that weapon?" he said, voice low, not a question, more like a fact. "You used to carry it back, when your name meant something more than a number." Lena said nothing. She looked at him, then looked away, the weight of the rifle pulling at her arms, and at something deeper inside. "I read your file," he said, "or what was left of it. Your record is buried deep, burned black, but not enough to erase everything. I know who you were, and I know why they made you disappear." Her eyes narrowed, her voice came out cold and sharp. "You don't know anything." Ramsey stepped closer, his boots quiet against the metal floor. "I know your team died on a mission that never made it to the news. I know you were the only one who came back, and I know you stopped speaking the day they told you it was your fault." Her fingers tightened around the rifle, her jaw clenched. But she still did not speak. The memories were there, just under the surface, faces, names, screams. She had locked them all away. "I also know your brother was part of that team," he said softer now, "and that you held him while he died." Lena's breath caught, the room spun, just a little, not from fear, not from pain, but from truth, sharp and sudden, like cold air in the lungs. She looked up at Ramsey, her eyes dark and steady. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," he said, "we need you, because the same group that killed your team is back, and they're hunting something or someone, and I think that someone is you." Lena shook her head, stepped back. "I'm not a soldier anymore. I clean rifles and keep my head down." "But that's not who you are," he said, "and we both know it. They erased your name, but not your skill, not your memory, not your fire." She stared at him a long time, the silence thick between them. Then slowly she lowered the rifle and looked at it, really looked at it, not just as a tool, but as a piece of her life, once held in her brother's hands, once held in hers. Ramsey turned and walked to a locker, opened it, and pulled out a small case. He placed it on a table and flipped it open. Inside were maps, photos, and one file with her name scratched out. "This is what they didn't want you to see," he said, "the last transmission from your team before they vanished. It wasn't a mistake, it was a trap, and they left you alive for a reason." Lena picked up the photo. On top it showed her team in the field, smiling, tired, dirty, but alive. Her brother was in the middle, arms around two others. She hadn't looked at their faces in years, but now they stared back at her like they had never left. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, sharper, clearer, the fear still there, but something else too, something old and strong. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. Ramsey looked at her with that same calm stare. "We're going back to where it started, and I want you with me, not as backup, not as a cleaner, but as what you were before." Lena looked down at her hands. The rifle felt heavier than before, but also right, like it belonged there, like she belonged here, not in the shadows, not in silence. She took a breath deep and long, then nodded once, slow and sure. "Good," he said, "meet me at the North Hangar in 2 days, gear up, train. If you need to, we move at dawn, and this time we finish what they started." As she turned to leave, Lena felt something shift inside her, the past and the present finally meeting in one place, the weight in her hands no longer a burden, but a choice. And she had just made it. The wind outside was sharp and cold as Lena moved toward the North Hangar, the sky still dark, the stars fading behind slow clouds. Her steps were light, her breath steady, but inside her chest the weight grew heavier with every second. The rifle across her back felt warm against the chill, like it remembered more than she did. She had not slept much, her dreams full of old fire and broken voices, names shouted in smoke, faces lost in the dark. She woke with sweat on her neck and her hands already reaching for the weapon, like her body knew what was coming before her mind did. When she reached the hangar, a shadow stepped forward from the open door. It was Ramsey again, dressed in black again, his face unreadable again. But something was different this time. He looked at her not like a stranger, not like a soldier, but like someone waiting for an answer. She nodded once and stepped inside. The hangar was wide and empty, except for a few crates and a small metal table, maps spread across it red marks, green lines, photos, with dates and targets, and one name written across the top in thick black ink: Goliath. Ramsey pointed at the map and spoke fast. The enemy is moving in patterns, small hits, across hidden outposts. They're not trying to destroy, they're searching, and we think they're searching for you. Lena stared at the name Goliath, a name from her nightmares, from her last mission, her team's last breath. It was the code name of the one who gave the order, the one who turned a rescue into a death trap. She remembered the sound of her brother's voice telling her to run, the heat of fire on her skin, the final shot that silenced everything. She remembered it all now. Ramsey watched her eyes and said quietly, "He's alive, and he knows you are too." Her hands clenched at her sides, her voice low and tight. "Then we make sure he never forgets." He nodded and pushed a second folder toward her. "This is your training schedule: weapons drills, movement memory tests. I know you already know how to fight, but we need you sharper, faster, deadlier than before." She opened the folder and scanned the list. Each item brought back pieces of her old self, the part buried under years of silence and shadow. She trained alone for hours, sweat soaked through her shirt, her hands blistered, her eyes never blinked. She ran the same drills she once led back when her name had power, back when she walked through fire and made it look like dance. Ramsey watched, sometimes saying nothing, just nodding when she did something right, raising an eyebrow. When she pushed too far, he never praised her, but he never doubted her either. On the third night, she stood in the dark with her rifle raised at the target. Ahead, the lights flickered, and the world narrowed to one breath, one finger, one trigger. The shot rang out sharp and clean, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Ramsey stepped forward, handed her a small chip, and said, "This holds the last voice recording from your team. We found it buried in the comm logs, but it's corrupted. We're trying to fix it." Lena took the chip, her hands trembling slightly. She did not listen to it, not yet, but she kept it close, tucked inside the cloth wrap around her rifle like a promise. The next morning, alarms screamed through the base, voices shouted, boots ran across the ground, and Lena was already moving before she heard the words: "Enemy breach, west wall, unknown number, heavy fire." She grabbed her gear and followed Ramsey into the storm. Bullets sparked against the metal walls, shadows danced in smoke and flame, and the air smelled of heat and dust. Ramsey's team moved with perfect rhythm, but even they were pushed back, pinned behind crates and barriers. The enemy had come fast and brutal, and no one expected it, except her. Lena moved through the chaos with calm eyes, her rifle up, her steps sure. She ducked low, jumped high, rolled between blasts, and fired only when the shot was true. She reached two wounded recruits, dragged them to cover, patched their wounds, and handed one a spare weapon, her voice firm and steady. "Hold this line, I'll clear the rest." Ramsey's voice came through the comms break. "Left, take out their high point, Lena, do not stop." But she had already seen it, the sniper on the tower, the blinking red light, the signal. They were tracking her. She aimed slow and quiet, her heart loud in her ears, her finger on the trigger, her mind empty and full at once. She fired. The tower cracked, the light vanished, and for a moment, the battlefield froze. Then Ramsey spoke again, voice sharper than before. "Target down, Lena. Fall back now." But she stood still, eyes locked on the broken tower, something in her chest breaking and building at the same time. She turned slowly, walked back through the smoke, the rifle warm in her hands again, like it had always been there. And as she passed Ramsey, he looked at her with something close to pride, but deeper, maybe even fear. "They know you're here now," he said. She looked at him and answered quietly, "Let them come." The sun had not yet risen, but the smoke was already rising from the west side of the base, black and thick and angry. The air smelled like burnt metal and sweat and fear. Lena stood near the edge of Bay 14, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her eyes sharp and searching as voices shouted orders and boots thundered past her. Ramsey ran toward her, his face tight with focus. "Enemy regrouping in sector. See," he said fast and clear, "we need to hold this line, and you're with me now. Stay close, stay sharp." Lena followed him without a word, her steps fast and sure, her heart beating like a war drum deep inside her chest, the memories of fire and blood pushing her forward, not pulling her back. They reached the outer wall, where soldiers crouched behind broken crates and bent fences, gunfire sparking across the air like lightning in a thunderstorm. Chaos moved like a living thing, and fear clung to every face. Lena dropped behind, cover her eyes, scanning the field. She counted 6 hostiles, maybe more, 1 heavy gunner, and a drone above circling like a hungry hawk. Ramsey barked orders, and the team split into 2 waves. But Lena stayed low, her hand steady on the rifle grip, her breath calm. She moved fast, her body, remembering things her mind had locked away. She rolled left, slid under cover, popped up, fired twice, 2 targets down, moved again. Without waiting, the other soldiers watched her like she was something new, something strange. Ramsey saw too. She was not just helping, she was leading. And they were starting to follow her, without even knowing why. An explosion rocked the ground near them, dust flew high, and someone screamed. But Lena pushed forward, without pause, her boots striking the ground like hammers, her rifle barking sharp and cold. She reached the drone station and took the shot, 1 clean bullet, and the machine dropped from the sky like a dying bird. The team cheered, but she was already moving again. Behind her, 1 soldier whispered to another, "Who is she?" And the answer came low and shaken, "I think she used to be Ghost." Back inside Bay 14, alarms began to wail again, red lights flashing along the ceiling. Another breach, this time closer, sharper. Someone had triggered the inner doors from the inside. Lena turned sharply, her eyes narrowed. She knew that bay better than anyone. She had cleaned every inch, memorized every vent, every screw. If the enemy wanted a weak point, that bay was the perfect spot. She shouted across the comms, "Ramsey, the breach is in 14, I'm going in." He answered fast, "Wait for backup," but she had already started to run. The hallway blurred around her as she ran, her rifle tight in her arms, the sound of gunfire growing louder. The door to Bay 14 was half open, smoke leaking out like breath from a wounded beast. She stepped inside, slow and silent, and the sight hit her like a wave. 2 enemies were inside, 1 placing charges on the racks of weapons, the other watching the door with a sharp blade and cold eyes. They hadn't seen her yet, but they would soon. Lena crouched low and crept behind the stacked crates, her fingers wrapping around the rifle grip like it was a part of her skin. She waited, 1 breath, 2, then she rose fast and fired once, twice. Both targets dropped before they could move. She moved quickly to disarm the charges, her hands steady as the countdown ticked down from 30, then 20, then 10. She cut the last wire with 1 second left, and the silence that followed was louder than any blast. She stood in the middle of the bay, breathing slow and heavy, and something in her chest cracked open again, not from fear, not from pain, but from the weight of what she had just done. Outside, Ramsey and the others arrived, guns ready. But the fight was over. Lena stood alone, the smoke clearing around her, the bodies still at her feet. Ramsey looked around, then looked at her. "You cleared this alone." She nodded once and said quietly, "It was mine to protect." The other soldiers stared, not in fear, but in something close to awe. They had seen her now, not just the girl who cleaned their rifles, but the warrior who held the line when others fell. Later that night, as the base went quiet again, Lena sat alone in the bay, her hands cleaning the same rifle she had carried into fire, her mind full of old memories and new truths. She unwrapped the small cloth beside her and pulled out the chip Ramsey had given her. She placed it into the comm unit and listened. At first the sound was broken, static. Then a voice, her brother's voice, came through, weak but clear. "Lena, if you get this, know that I never blamed you. We were set up, we walked into a trap. And they wanted one of us to survive, not because of guilt, but because of data. You have something, they need something hidden inside your link." The message cut out, then returned again. "Lena, find Goliath and end it for all of us." She sat still, the room silent, the night deep, the weight of her brother's words heavy in her chest, but not crushing this time. It was fire, it was fuel. She stood slowly, placed the rifle across her back, and looked toward the far door. The girl in the bay was gone. What walked out now was someone else entirely. The base had gone quiet again, but the silence felt fake, like it was waiting to break. Lena walked beside Ramsey through the long halls, past the rooms where soldiers whispered her name like a secret. Some looked at her with fear, some with respect, but none saw her the same as before. They reached the war room, where a single screen lit the space maps, lines, dots moving in real time. The enemy was not retreating, they were shifting, changing their pattern, adapting, like they already knew what the humans would do next. Ramsey pointed at the red marks on the screen, each one a recent attack, each one closer to the center of the base. "They are testing our defense," he said. "They're not just trying to hurt us, they are trying to get something inside the base or someone." Lena crossed her arms, her voice steady. "They want me." Ramsey nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. Your old unit found something before the trap, before the silence. Something the enemy needs, something only you can access now. And they have waited all this time for you to come out of hiding. She looked at the screen again, a blinking red that appeared in the far corner of the map, the location of the last transmission, before her team vanished. Ramsey tapped the point with his finger. We traced the signal. It leads to an old listening post deep in the northern hills, remote, cold, buried in snow and silence. No one goes there anymore. But something there woke up 3 days ago and started sending data toward us. Lena felt her chest tighten. That was the place. That was where it ended. Ramsey looked at her. I want you to go back. They're not as bait, not as a target, but as a weapon. I want you to face what happened and shut it down for good. She said nothing at first, just looked at the rifle on her back, then at the room around her, where plans were made and lives were counted like numbers. I will go, she said, but not alone. He nodded. I'll come with you, and 2 others, a small team, no noise, no signal, just to clean in and out. If things go wrong, you have permission to burn the whole place down. She smirked slightly, the first smile in days, maybe weeks. Good. The next hours moved fast. Gear was packed, drones, disabled weapons checked twice, then 3 times. They left at dawn. No lights, no comms, only breath and boots on frozen ground. The journey to the northern hills took hours, through snow, through shadow, through silence. The post looked dead from the outside, broken panels, frozen doors, but inside lights flickered weak and blue, and a low hum filled the air like the building itself was breathing. Lena moved first, her rifle up, her eyes scanning every corner. The walls were stained with old soot, the air smelled of rust, and something else, something sharp like burned data. They found the main room, quickly, screens, cracked floors, covered in old papers, but one console still worked, glowing, with a slow pulse. Ramsey plugged in the decoder and watched as code streamed across the screen. He frowned, then stepped back. Lena, you need to see this. She walked over and stared at the screen. What she saw made her knees feel weak. It was a video feed from her last mission, her team running her brother, shouting, her own face bloody and broken and afraid. Then it changed and showed her walking through fire, but not alone. Behind her was Goliath, tall, dark, face hidden by a mask, voice calm, as he gave the order, eliminate all except her. Lena looked away, her voice low and cold. He planned it from the start. He wanted me to live. Ramsey's eyes narrowed. The feed is coming from another source, underground, deep below the post. They moved fast down a rusted stairwell into the cold belly of the station, the lights dim, the air thick with dust and memory. They reached a locked door, and Lena stepped forward, placed her hand against the scanner. It clicked open with a hiss, and what they saw inside made all of them freeze. In the middle of the room was a glass chamber, and inside it floated a small silver cube glowing, with slow blue light lines of code pulsing across its surface. Around the room were photos of Lena and her team, notes written in sharp ink, and one name repeated over and over, Ghost, Ghost, Ghost. Ramsey whispered, this is a memory core, not just data, but personality, training, skill, even fragments of thought. This is why they left you alive. They needed you to access this. Lena walked to the chamber, slowly reached out and touched the glass. Her reflection stared back, older, sharper, colder. She looked at Ramsey. We take it now, before they do. He nodded and reached for his tools, but then the lights cut out and the hum stopped. The room dropped into total blackness. A voice echoed through the chamber, smooth, deep, and cruel, welcome back, Ghost. Lena raised her rifle, heart pounding, finger on the trigger. The past was no longer behind her. It was standing in the dark with her now. The room stayed dark for a moment longer than it should. The cold air pressed close around Lena, like a second skin. The voice still echoed in her ears, smooth and sharp like a knife sliding across glass. Welcome back, Ghost, it had said, and the way it said her name made her blood heat and her hand steady. She crouched low, her rifle raised, finger on the trigger. Ramsey beside her, already scanning the shadows, his voice quiet and calm, eyes sharp. We are not alone, stay close. A soft hum returned to the room. Dim lights flickered back on revealing shapes in the dark, 4 tall figures standing still around the chamber, faces hidden behind masks, bodies too perfect, too still, not breathing, not human. They were soldiers, but not living ones. They were coated shells, machines wrapped in old uniforms built to protect the core and kill anyone else. Lena had seen this tech before, deep in the files of her erased past, black ops level, beyond law, beyond mercy. One of the machines turned its head slowly toward her and spoke. The ghost is awake. Protocol shift to retrieval. Do not damage primary target. Lena narrowed her eyes. I am not your target, and I am not going with you. Ramsey opened fire, his rounds bouncing off the first machine, barely slowing at Lena, moved fast, sliding, left firing. At weak points in the joint, sparks flew. As her shots hit true, one machine dropped, but three kept moving. The room turned to chaos, bullets, flying metal screaming, the core pulsing faster. As if aware of the fight, Lena dove behind a console, reloaded, and stood again, firing quick and clean. She took down the second, then the third, but the last one reached her, grabbed her by the vest, and slammed her back into the wall. Pain shot through her side, but her grip held. She brought the rifle up between them and fired point blank. The machine dropped its grip and fell in pieces. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, the core still glowing, its light now faster and brighter. Ramsey stepped over the wreckage, checking the room. Clear for now, but we need to move. Lena walked to the chamber again, placed her hand on the glass, and whispered low, I remember now, I remember what this is what they did. The core opened with a soft click, the cube rising slowly into her hands, light running along her fingers, like it knew her name. Ramsey looked at her. This is everything. Your team died for this, is what they kept hidden. She nodded and wrapped the core in cloth, tucking it close to her chest, like something sacred. They left this for me, and I will finish what they started. They moved fast back through the station, out into the cold where the snow had started falling again, quiet and slow, but something was different. The wind carried a sound, a hum, like engines above. Lena looked up and saw them, dark shapes in the sky, dropping fast, enemy dropship, sleek and silent, no lights, no warning. She turned to Ramsey. They're coming now, all of them. They ran toward the ridge where their evac beacon waited, but gunfire sparked behind them. Already voices shouted, metal feet hit the ground. Lena spun and fired again, and again, each shot sharper than the last. Ramsey covered her flank, but more were coming. Too many. Lena glanced back, saw the beacon flashing red, and a rescue craft dropping low just ahead. Go, Ramsey shouted, but she stayed, her rifle still hot, still firing. She backed toward the edge, then turned and ran just as the ramp dropped and the ship opened for them. They jumped inside, the door slammed shut, and the ship rose into the sky, snow spinning around them, bullets chasing shadows below. Inside the hold, Lena dropped to her knees, holding the core close, breathing fast but steady. Ramsey sat beside her, bruised but alive. You did it, he said. You brought it back. She looked at him. Not just it, she said. I brought myself back too. Later at the base, command met them with wide eyes and tense faces, but they said nothing when she walked past them, rifle still in her hands, head high. She went straight to Bay 14, where it all began, the place she once hid, the place she once cleaned, rifles that were never hers. She placed the core on the old workbench, unwrapped it slowly, watched it glow across the metal, and then she reached under the bench and pulled out her own rifle, the one marked with her brother's code. She cleaned it one last time, slow and careful, then stood and turned as new recruits entered the bay, eyes wide, voices quiet. One girl stepped forward, holding a dusty rifle, unsure where to place it, unsure what to say. Lena took it from her hands, cleaned it quick and silent, then gave it back, her eyes calm and steady. You're not just here to clean, she said. Someday, you'll see. The recruits left one by one, but Lena stayed sitting on the bench, the rifle beside her, the core still pulsing gently like a heartbeat. She was not just a cleaner, not just a ghost, not just a name erased. She was everything they tried to hide and everything they could not stop. And now the galaxy would remember.